Welcome, lords and lovelies, to Knights of the Round podcast. I'm your co-host, Lord Arthur.
And I am Lady Ravah. I decided to let Arthur introduce this time with his wonderful buttery radio voice.
I feel so special. And welcome to part 2 of Adaptations. If you haven't seen part 1, we highly recommend you go watch it. It's not required, but we'll be talking about and referencing some of the things that we mentioned in that first video. So it's a good listen. Go ahead and check it out.
We're not going to be hitting on a lot of the definitions that we did the first time. Mm-hmm. So if you want to go back and watch that, what we do want to say is we are going to talk specifically, like we said in part 1, about anime and animation live action adaptations, because that is a whole podcast onto itself. So if you're not interested in anime, really, because that's going to really be the main focus of this one, be sure to check out part 1 where we talk about like book to film adaptations, or part 3, which is where we're just going to include a bunch of stuff that we're not going to get to talk about, but that behind the scenes we've been talking about a lot. So I just want to
we just really realized that there's a lot of stuff to touch on.
And
we're probably not going to get to everything that we want to talk about.
So just real quick, I wanted to re-hit on our definitions that we said of what does a good adaptation need to do, because we are going to still look at these in the lens of what a good adaptation needs to do. And I had 3 specific criteria. You have to understand the story that you're trying to tell. You have to know the themes or the world, the message, and the characters of the story that you're trying to tell. And you can take some creative liberties, but you have to be able to do those well, or you have to understand, again, what you're trying to do and the source.
And I summed it up as simply a good adaptation is a faithful recreation of the themes and messages of the original work in a new medium.
And those are just general and specific, but I think when you talk about anime, you have to talk about a couple of other things when you think about what would make for a good adaptation. So when you have a live action anime adaptation, and I've seen quite a couple of more than Arthur has, but we're going to try to stick to ones that we have in common that we've both seen. But rule number 1 for adapting an anime for live action, you need to adapt something that would work in a live action setting. And we're going to talk about a couple of those that work in a live action setting. You don't want to adapt something that it's good because it's anime or because it's a cartoon. It's animated and that's how it works, but it doesn't have any place in any sort of realistic world with real people. So that's rule number 1. Rule number 2 is you have to understand, going back again, why it was originally good. And specifically with anime, you have to understand what kind of audience you are now trying to tell this story to, regardless of if it's a Japanese live action or, in more of the failure cases, the American live action adaptations.
And just to kind of point out something that's kind of obvious, but we don't talk about it, almost all anime is in and of itself an adaptation, because most anime start out as manga, as
manga or light novels,
or light novels, and they are adapted into anime.
And I will say, in that case, one of my goals, one of my things is I want to start getting more into manga and reading more of the manga. Except for the Attack on Titan manga, I'm not going to read the Attack on Titan manga, and I don't care how many of you guys tell me to. I'm not reading the manga before the last part of the season comes out. So. Yeah. But I do want to try to get into that and kind of look at those different comparisons between the show and the manga. Not to say that I don't read manga. I own the entirety of the Fullmetal Alchemist manga. I have a large manga collection, but I'm gonna be honest, none of it is recent.
Let us talk about the multi-headed Hydra that is Fullmetal Alchemist, because it is a manga that was adapted into an anime that was recreated into a different anime, which was adapted into live action.
Yeah, sure. We can totally talk about that. One of the things that I'm trying to get Arthur to do, and I've actually convinced him, we are currently, as of late July, we are finishing up Soul Eater. I've seen Soul Eater a couple of times. Arthur has never seen it. I'm trying not to call you Barathor. But so we're watching it together. We're almost done. We've got to finish Trigun, because I'm not going to let you not finish Trigun.
No, I'm totally invested in Trigun. But while you were watching Trigun, I was watching Cowboy Bebop.
Yes, maybe. Well, I've seen Trigun several times.
Yeah, fair enough.
But and then we're gonna watch Brotherhood. So we're gonna we want to have a whole conversation eventually on the original Full Metal Alchemist versus Brotherhood.
So note that I have, as of the recording of this episode, I have not watched Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. I've watched the original Full Metal Alchemist. I'm getting some very disapproving looks from our sound guy. I've watched the original Full Metal Alchemist. I've watched the movie Conqueror of Shambhala. I've read up until, spoiler alert, Maze Hughes' death in the original, and I've watched the live action. I've yet to watch Brotherhood past Maze Hughes' death. I just hate myself. I would watch it until Maze Hughes died, and I'll turn it off. I go, no, that's bullshit. No, I'm not gonna.
So,
no.
And this has actually become one of my favorite Arthur phrases. Is Maze Hughes died, and he got unbelievably frick ass mad.
Oh no, that's not good. Unbelievably fuck ass mad.
And he was like, nope, I don't want to do this. But going into that, you have seen the live action adaptation that Japan did that's on Netflix currently. Yes. Okay, good. And I've seen that too. So I think that's a good place to start. So what did you think about Netflix's live action? And I don't think Netflix made it. I just think they bought it.
They bought it and so put it on their streaming platform. I don't think they made it either. But I think that it was, because actually the Full Metal Alchemist live action was my first ever treatise into anime live action adaptations.
Really?
That
you
was
were
the
lucky.
First ever, because I saw Dragon Ball Evolution coming out, and oh boy, we will talk about that. And I went, no, because I saw from just the trailers, I was like, this is going to be a garbage fire.
You at that time didn't have anything to compare it to.
No, absolutely not. When I first watched it, I was like, well, this kind of works, but it kind of really doesn't. And to me, the parts that worked were the characters talking. It was them knowing about the world, and like the subtle things, the politics, the mystery and the thriller aspects of Full Metal Alchemist. Those worked fantastically. What did not work were the fights.
And I think that has to do, and I've seen this in several different live action adaptations that come out of Japan. Specifically, I can also one thing I can think of is the clips I've seen from the live action Attack on Titan films. They have a very different. It's almost like they have a very different style of animation, not animation, like CGI. I guess
massively
over there.
Different.
And it is for us in a Western audience. We're so spoiled with Marvel and what the mouse can put out, and
that we're like, it's almost hard to distinguish between what's actually there and what's CGI'd in.
So I think for us, when we see something like that, it's very jarring.
I love how you put it earlier, is that the Attack on Titans from the live action, they don't look like Titans. They look like your sleep paralysis demons.
And yes, Titans are scary, but that's not what they're supposed to look like. But anyway, and I think that for that specific live action adaptation, for us as an American audience, a Western audience, it is strange. But I think if you understand that their animation studios, or not, I keep saying animation, their like CG studios and programs and stuff over there are different, you can kind of excuse that unless it severely takes away from the film. Right. And I think there are clearly things that are part of Full Metal Alchemist that if you don't CG them, you can't do them.
You cannot really get alchemy to happen. You have to CG the alchemy.
Right.
But I would like to point out that like the reason why the alchemy fights work in the manga, why they work in the anime, is because you have these interesting frames. You can really play with the perspective in a manga frame or in any kind of drawing that you really can't play with an actual video camera.
Yeah, when you're drawing, you can have your character do whatever you want to.
And you can place the camera wherever you want that camera to be and have exactly the same perspective or angle or point of view that you want it to have. But you cannot have that same freedom with an actual physical camera and actual physical actors on an actual physical set.
So with Full Metal, again, I agree with you. I think it was fine. It's not something, as far as an anime live action adaptation goes, it's pretty good.
It's solid.
As a movie, it's fine.
It's
if you are a fan, it's passable. It'll kill, an hour and a half of your time. It's not the worst. The casting is fine. The costuming's
pretty
fine.
solid.
I want to say there's a scene, and it just lives in my brain, where Gluttony in the film reveals part of his true form. And if you've seen that, it's where he opens up and there's a giant mouth in his body. And it shows him from the back. And from the back, they have practical effects it. So you can see like the little teeth like kind of bobbing up and down as the actor's running away. It's very cute. But I think, if you want to, that one is fine. But then that's where things deviate. So we've talked about things that are fine. But I know that most people want to they're like, all right,
let's trash talk.
Let's trash. So I want to actually start this because I think we can do this as a good conversation. With the question of why Dragon Ball Evolution does not work as an adaptation. I don't even want to talk about the fact that it just wasn't a good movie, but the fact that it does not work as an adaptation of Dragon Ball Z, Super. It doesn't even work as a good Dragon Ball GT adaptation.
So I'll tell you why. They watched Dragon Ball Z and told a Dragon Ball story.
That's good. You're good.
So they watched Dragon Ball Z, and if you think about the primary fights in the primary storytelling in Dragon Ball Z, it is literally combat so fast that you can't see it, and it's animated with literally just lines growing across the page. Right,
because that's how in anime they do a lot like that. They do a lot of things like that to because in a TV show, a lot of times anime doesn't get a lot of budget, so they'll do things like that to save parts of their animation.
But even in the manga, even in Akira Toriyama's manga, that's how he drew it to describe that these characters are literally fighting so fast that you cannot see them fighting. So he would just draw lines intersecting and then big old boom clouds.
Right.
And again, the other biggest part of Dragon Ball Z, the ki blasts.
Yes.
That is the primary mode through which damage is dealt in Dragon Ball Z.
And you would say too, would you say that ki and ki blasts and things like that, all these special moves are they more integral in Dragon Ball Z than they were in the original Dragon Ball?
1,000,000 times more integral in Dragon Ball Z than they were in Dragon Ball.
Because I've only
ki was a special technique that very, very, very few people knew how to utilize in Dragon Ball. And they were usually channeled into very, very specific techniques. The Kamehameha wave, the Dodon ray, the Tri-beam, like the very, very specific attacks. But it got to the point where in Dragon Ball Z, literally that was a joke. It's you died to an unnamed ki blast. You're weak. Get out of here.
Right.
But there was not an unnamed energy attack in Dragon Ball. Maybe King Piccolo fired out a single beam from his finger.
But in a way too, in Dragon Ball, you kind of expect that because King Piccolo is not a human, so we don't know what kind of alien abilities that he could have. It's not useful.
And literally, they don't describe him as an alien in the original Dragon Ball. They call him a demon. They call him a devil.
Oh, that's right.
The concept of Namekians doesn't exist in Dragon Ball.
Right.
Kami is literally the god protector of the world, and Piccolo is literally the devil. In the original Dragon Ball, at least as far as they explained it. And of course, that massively gets retconned in Z. But like I said, they watched Z and told a Dragon Ball story, which let's just start at the very core of it. That Western audiences know Western stories. They don't know Eastern stories, and Dragon Ball is in and of itself a combination of two very popular Eastern stories. Journey to the West, which is an ancient Chinese story, and I forget the title of it, but there's a story of Momotaro, I think it is a little boy that arrives in a peach that has spectacular strength and goes off to an island to train, and becomes super strong. That, again, Goku arriving in the Saiyan pod, he has incredible strength, he goes on a journey, he goes to an island to train. So these are very centralized Eastern stories, but it's you couldn't really take the tales of King Arthur and his court, you can't really take the Canterbury Tales or Beowulf and just plant them in a Japanese audience and have the Japanese audience be oh, that's Beowulf. I know exactly what he's about.
Right.
It's no, they've never heard of these stories before.
Well, I mean, they probably heard of them as well. But what they
Not in the 80s.
what I think they did, as somebody who has never watched Dragon Ball in its entirety, I've seen clips, I've seen a couple episodes. I never watched Dragon Ball. I watched Dragon Ball Z religiously as a child, but that's neither here nor there. They tried to take this very Eastern story and do what everybody was doing in the early 2000s, and they set it in an American high school. And that's why it doesn't work. I don't think Goku in the anime has ever set foot into a school in his entire life.
The only time Goku has ever set foot in a school in his entire life was when he and Chi-Chi were going to a private school to try to enroll Gohan, and Goku is sitting there in a suit and tie like, I hate this. Can't I wear my gi? And Chi-Chi's like, if you don't stop moving, I'm going to beat you up.
And so what they tried to do is they tried to take Goku, who is this very well-established character, at the point that
Precious idiot, we love him.
Evolution had come out, he had been a character that, anime fans that Japan has been familiar with for probably close
decades.
To 20 years at that point.
Came out in 86.
And they said, hey, this is Goku, this whiny American teenager.
This angsty American teenager.
Angsty, yes, he was angsty. American teenager who wants to impress girls is Goku.
Goku is the most asexual character I have ever witnessed in anime, ever. Like, literally, like, Chi-Chi asks in the original Dragon Ball manga, will you marry me? And he goes, sure, I'll have some of that later, thinking that she meant that marriage was a food. This man is like the definition of a 6 intelligence.
His himbim.
He is such a himbim.
He is the original himbim.
Such a himbo.
But it, again, goes back to that. They don't understand who Goku was. They said, hey, we're going to call this guy Goku because that's what the fans recognize.
Give him the personality of Jacob from Twilight.
That's basically what they did. And
then we're going to let him use a Kamehameha wave, but it looks like airbending.
Right. And we wanted to talk about...
These are like blasts of plasma that incinerate things. And like, what do you mean it blows out candles? Yeah, no, it blows up mountains. The first time we see the Kamehameha wave... I'm sorry, I'm getting really... I'm worked up. The first time we see the Kamehameha wave in the series is when Roshi uses it to literally blow up a mountain. Like, and you're using it to snuff out candles? Get the fuck out of my face.
So I started the monumental task, and it only hurt a little bit, of thinking, how could Dragon Ball have worked as a live action adaptation? And the answer is, if you want to keep it with your same characters, if you're doing, Dragon Ball with Goku and Chi-Chi and Bulma and the original Dragon Ball characters, the answer is you can't. Yeah. You cannot tell Dragon Ball or any of its iterations as a live action show because it doesn't work as a live action. It's got these, all these zany characters and these abilities that it does work as an anime, but that doesn't translate to real people on the screen.
I would add a rebuttal to that. You cannot tell a Dragon Ball Z story with those characters in live action.
That's fair.
But Dragon Ball, the original run of Dragon Ball, it was a martial arts anime. It was an ode to martial arts. It
was Akira Toriyama's love for martial arts.
Yeah, that, and it was kind of told through the vein of the Journey to the West. And so you can absolutely have them fighting, like silly, goofy villains like Oolong or the Rabbit Lord or whoever his name was, and Emperor Pilaf. But think about like the ways that they defeat, these creatures. They didn't do it with these big giant beam struggles.
No,
they did it with kung fu, and American audiences are very familiar with kung fu movies. Like, yeah, get some actors that have awesome choreography. Don't jump in with King Piccolo. Start off with Tien Shinhan and the Crane School. You're literally just telling a different version of Karate Kid at that point.
Well, I thought of it in a different way. I thought of it as, to me, Dragon Ball, if you scrape out all the characters and you just leave, what is the story about? It is named Dragon Ball because of the Dragon Balls, which are a central point of the plot. And, that's how Bulma and Goku meet the first time.
So that Bulma was looking for the Dragon Balls.
And it's about, fighting, essentially. you could take that. And if you said, hey, I want to tell a Dragon Ball story in America, take that and use that to tell an American story. Almost kind of like, and I don't want to talk about this movie specifically, but like Mortal Kombat created a new character and told his story.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to argue whether that's good or bad. That's for a different episode. But doing something similar, take the Dragon Balls, take a kid who's fighting. Almost, we had the Karate Kid, and apparently that was a big, huge thing in the 80s. We can do stuff like that, but not if you're trying to take characters that have been beloved for decades and you're trying to adapt them and say, hey, Goku is now a relatable, angsty tween. Tweens, come see our movie. Because that's not a good adaptation.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm over here giggling because I had the thought, it just have the Karate Kid, but add particle effects. And there you go. You now have basically the entire second season.
Mr. Miyagi sends him to look for the Dragon Balls.
Mr. Miyagi sends him to look for the Dragon Balls. And when they punch each other, add particle effects. Woo, there you go. You've now created the second arc of the original Dragon Ball.
I mean, you could even, make it a parallel. You have this you want to make it American, fine, set it in an American city. He's this young American punk who has this grandfather or uncle or whoever who's been taking care of him, and he dies. You could even have parallels, but if you change up the characters, then it will make more sense to an American audience, and it won't be a crappy adaptation that is panned not just for being a bad movie, but it is a bad adaptation of the original source material.
So to bring this kind of back down, so we could just sit here and for the next 55 minutes rag on Dragon Ball Evolution. There's no shortage of things to make fun of this movie about, but let's keep it censored.
Can I just mention that they end the movie by shooting a Kamehameha blast into somebody's chest to save their life?
Okay. Okay. Goku. I'll actually say that is 4. That is a point against it for not being as violent as the original source material, where Goku defeats King Piccolo by literally punching his entire body through King Piccolo's torso. Literally, absolutely ripping this man in half with his skull. You want to talk about a violent way to fucking die? But no, bringing it centering it in on how would you make this work? Because you could make it work.
I mean, I said how I would make it work. How would you make it work?
Like you said, if you wanted to really just even if you wanted to keep it as true to the original as you want to, understand what story the original was trying to tell. The original was trying to do basically a adaptation of the Journey to the West. Son Goku is literally a stand-in for Sun Wukong in the Journey to the West, which if y'all listening in haven't heard of or read up on the Journey to the West, it is a landmark piece of ancient Chinese literature. Please check it out. You'll start to find out that there is a lot of things in modern day that are actually heavily inspired by it. It is basically their version of the Epic of Gilgamesh. But anyways, have it set in if you want to have it set in an American town. Opening scene, Goku is walking around, but suddenly he just gets randomly side-swiped by a car, and the girl gets out oh god, I just killed a guy, and have him just pop up and be like, no, I'm fine. How are you not dead? I've just kind of always been like that.
So you're saying that if we're going to adapt it that way, then the live-action Goku needs to be Goku and not Edward Cullen.
Not Edward Cullen, no. Because you're not going to sell that. When you say this is a Dragon Ball movie, they're not the people who see that and go, I'm going to go see that, aren't going to be like, I really hope this guy has the personality of Jacob from Twilight. No, they're like, I want to go see action, fight. What is it that makes the original work? It's the sense of adventure, the comedy, and the action. Those are the 3 pillars of which Dragon Ball stands. Adventure, comedy, action. Because as much as we love the big fights like Goku versus Vegeta, you want to know what kills Vegeta? Yajirobe.
The joke character.
The joke character comes out and cuts his tail off while all the little side characters, Krillin and Gohan, slowly chip damage him to the point where Krillin, out of energy, grabs the joke character's sword, a weapon long since proved absolutely ineffective against these people, and was about to go stab this man to death. That's how they defeat Vegeta, not through punching each other in ki blasts. The joke character beats him.
Well, what is it you say that Akira Toriyama always says about his fights?
I'm glad that you mentioned that. One of my favorite quotes from Akira Toriyama when he's riding a fight, and especially his big fights, and he's asked, what is the most logical way for this fight to end? Okay, that doesn't happen. What is the second most logical way? Okay, that doesn't happen. And he'll go down the list until he reaches like the seventh most logical conclusion for that fight to end. And that's how he draws his fights.
Well, is he the one who says that if you have a joke character and a serious character fighting, the joke character always wins?
Yes, absolutely. Is that if you have a joke, that is also one of his quotes. If you have a joke character and a serious character fighting, the joke character will always win because that's the joke. That the joke character will always beat the serious character, and the more angry the serious character gets, the funnier it gets. But again, if you want to do it as what it was, a journey to the West, but set in America. Have him basically like living in like the mountains of Appalachia, and suddenly he gets run over by a girl in a car, and they're like, look, I found like these magical stones. Let's go find them. I have a radar that can track them down. Sweet, I can wish my grandpa back and tell him I'm sorry. And so they go on a quest, and you can, again, keep it set in America and still have this big open journey. And they go to different places and have different struggles along the way before eventually getting to the end. Some big climactic fight happens. They have to sacrifice their wish of the dragons in order to defeat the big bad or prevent them from getting their wish. It's like, well, there goes all the Dragon Balls. They scattered to the four corners. Well, you want to meet up in a year and do it all again? Da, 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 da. And that's how the movie ends. Boof, you have now told.
So you think it would be
the core of what makes Dragon Ball, but set it in America. There you go.
Think they should have just told a regular Dragon Ball story in America?
Absolutely. And going back to what I said before, they saw Dragon Ball Z and told a Dragon Ball story. They saw the ki blasts and the big fights and the action, but that is not what made Dragon Ball work.
And if they're going to what they, the story that they told was that they were establishing this is a Goku who doesn't know Chi-Chi or Bulma or Yamcha or whatever Roshi. I guess Roshi wasn't too off brand in the film.
He was the closest to on character. I will say that.
And if you're going to tell that, that has to be a Dragon Ball story because that's
those
what
are
that
those
is.
characters.
So you're right. I still think that they should have just kept it in the world of Dragon Ball, but taken some the freedoms and tried to adapt it for an American audience. It doesn't always work, but that's how I think that should have gone.
Speaking of other things set in America that probably shouldn't have been, but probably could have been, let's talk about what you've been dying to talk about this whole time. Death Note.
Thank you. I was going to segue into that, but I didn't know if you still wanted to talk about Dragon Ball.
Like I said, we could talk about Dragon Ball for the next 8 hours. We got to move on.
If you want to get into a good conversation with Arthur, just ask him anything about Dragon Ball, and he will talk to you about it. It's one of his.
It's one of my favorites. Absolutely, the manga, the anime. It's one of my absolute favorite.
Now, Death Note tried to do what I described. They tried to take that Japanese story, which we'll get to that, and tell it in America. Now, Death Note actually does hit some of my one rule. It hits the rule of it. I don't think Death Note is a bad story to tell in live action. It doesn't have these crazy big fights. It is a very grounded story, and I think it can tell a good story. A lot of times, what people, at least in the videos I've seen, people who talk about the live action Death Note, they don't mention that there are 3 live action Death Note movies that were made in Japan, and they're good. Because they took something that's fit for live action adaptation, and they understood what people liked about Death Note, and they made it into films. And their creative liberty was the end of the second movie, where they did add one extra rule into the Death Note. But it worked in the story because they're not going to be able to tell Light and L and Nier and Mellow's stories. they wanted to tell Light and L's story, which is at its core what Death Note is about. It's about that game. And so they told that, and then they ended it there. They didn't bring in, all those outside influences, and that worked for the film. But it took something that was good at adaptation, and it understood what it was trying to adapt. It understood who L was. It understood Light and all of the other characters. And that is where the second part is where the 2017 Netflix version falls short.
Okay. So letting you continue off from that, what do the Japanese live action ones hit well that you think the American one did not?
So they took Light, who Light is he's a believable character.
He's a psychopath.
Yes, but do you not think that there is a person that could exist in the world like Yagami?
Yeah, absolutely. I know that there are, in fact, millions just like him.
But they took the realistic character in the Japanese version, and they made him a handsome, suave teenager in Japan who was insanely smart but bored of the world. They took the characters from the screen and just put them from the book, the anime, from the anime, and just put them on the silver screen.
Yeah,
and that's what they did. And it was good. You still have a lot of that tension. It still hit a lot of those same big hallmarks, but it understood what Death Note was. Death Note at its core is a story about justice, and it is the cat and mouse of Light Yagami and L.
It is a mystery thriller. It's a supernatural mystery thriller.
So, and again, if you did so what then goes into the issues with the live action one for America is they again are taking these characters that we are familiar with, and they're trying to reestablish them as different characters. They told us that this character right here is supposed to be Light Yagami, or Light Turner is what they named in the movie. Ryuk was fine. Ryuk was the best person about the movie, and the fact that they wasted a good Willem Dafoe performance is a crime. He doesn't do many movies anymore. Don't waste some Willem Dafoe. That was good, but they didn't understand who Light Yagami was. They tried to do that at the end. And they tried to say, he had this planned all along type thing for Light. But even before he gets the Death Note, we get none of that. He is a wimpy, scared kid that it barely does anything to establish that he has the smarts that he supposedly has at the end of the movie when he tricks Discount Misa. I don't remember what her name in the movie was.
Misa.
Because they give her a different name, so I can accept that she is supposed to be the Misa Amane character, but she's not Misa Amane, so I can accept the fact that she's not Misa, and that was fine. Right. She was her own character.
They followed the rules that you previously said, that they did change the names of the characters. So no, this is not exactly the same character.
This isn't Misa Amane.
This isn't a Misa Amane. This is not Light Yagami. This is Light Turner.
But the fact that they
to me is a cop out. But go ahead.
The fact that they name him Light means that we are supposed to associate him, both Light and L, with their original counterparts. They changed the female love interest character's name. And so that way we can accept that she is a different character. If you're going to name your character Light, we are going to expect that he has some of the characteristics of who Light Yagami is. So you've seen the live action Death Note before, right?
Yeah. Well, I've seen, again, the Netflix. I've not seen the Japanese live action Death Note.
Yeah. But that's where when we're talking about adaptations, we can talk about either or.
Right. But so I think you're entirely right. One, that Willem Dafoe as Ryuk is absolutely the best role because he plays a really good unhinged psychopath. We love him for it. Let's just be honest. He's kind of typecast at this point.
Yeah.
Because you haven't seen Boondock Saints. He's basically Ryuk, but as a human in Boondock Saints. I think that you're right that they absolutely got the character of Light wrong, because when you watch the anime, if you read the manga, like Light is adored by the females in his class. He's extremely confident. His teachers are impressed by his intelligence. They set us up very early on in like the first few minutes. Light is intelligent, Light is charismatic, Light is loved by everybody, and Light is bored. And then they add that once he discovers that he has the Death Note, Light has an absolutely unyielding sense of justice. And that boredom plus that unyielding sense of justice creates in him a psychotic snap, which leads him to believe that he shall be the new god of this world and shall correct it with this new power he has found. And as he now controls the power of death, he will eliminate crime on a global scale by murdering all the criminals.
So then, knowing all of that, again, you reiterated the plot of the original. So then why does the Netflix 2017 version not work as an adaptation?
Because you take this wimpy, spineless coward and you put him in the same situation, he will not make those same choices. You wouldn't expect him to. You wouldn't expect him to be so confident about every single thing that he's doing. That's why in the original, when Light does get shaken, when Elle and the police start getting close and you see that he's getting nervous, you're like, oh shit, Light is getting nervous? Ah, man, things are getting real fucking rough. But, like, honestly, if you gave this wimpy, nerdy kid the Death Note in America, like, I would expect him to write the names of the 6 people who are bullying him and then, like, get afraid of the power that he wields and then throw the book in the trash can. And, like that's a realistic reaction to him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where the hell did this spine come from? That was mostly my major gripe about it, is that all throughout the movie, I really just felt like I don't know, he was an unwilling participant in his own movie.
Damn.
And then at some point, like halfway through, they just completely stopped pretending that he was Light Turner and just supplanted the personality of Light Yagami over him. And I'm like, where the fuck did this character snap come from?
And again, it would have worked if they just took the idea of what the Death Note is and gave it to this kid. Even they could have given him the same kid,
right.
But don't call him Light and don't expect us to think that he was Light. And I think the movie would have been forgiven for a lot more if that wasn't Light. That could have been Nate or Carl.
Nate Turner.
No, second thought, no, not that. Like Carl or Tim or anything but telling us that this is Light Yagami.
Light, no. And I completely agree with you. So I could talk about Dragon Ball the same way that you talk about Death Note, because Death Note is actually one of your favorite
It
properties.
is one of the things that I always say is a good gateway anime. That it's a good anime to get people interested. It doesn't have a lot of the really weird tropes that people think, stereotypes that people think anime has.
Dragon Ball.
And it's just it is a great all around show. It has a fault after about episode 25, but then the
at that
ending
point, you're
makes
so
up for
far
that.
in, if you're at that point, you're invested anyways.
You're gonna want to see it, but it does fall off after that. But it picks up right there back again at the end.
You're right, and I think that you're right. That I think it's a pretty good introduction anime. The only complaint I would say against that is that Ryuk's character design is very weird, but
he's a god of death. We, in the West, we have lots of different interpretations of the Grim Reaper. I mean, we saw it in that episode of Ink Master we watched, where all of their different interpretations of the Grim Reaper. So if we say, hey, it's the god of death, we can suspend our disbelief and say, okay, he's a god of death. He's supposed to look pretty terrifying and scary and unnatural.
Willem Dafoe.
And that's part of Ryuk's design, is he's supposed to make you feel unnerved.
Like, actually, that's how I think Light defeats like this mugger on a bus or something that like starts like holding everybody up.
Yes.
Is that he tricks the mugger into grabbing a piece of the Death Note so that he could see Ryuk, and the dude just freaks out the moment he sees him. Which again is the testament to how smart Light is. That like even when he's quote unquote getting caught doing things, it's because he wants to be getting, like, you get the feeling that this guy is like a Joker level mastermind. But I don't get that sense from this whiny brat in the American version.
Right.
Awesome.
And And the film would like to tell us that he is this mastermind because they try to say, hey, he's had all this planned all along and he had planned to kill, I don't remember what her name is,
Fake Misa.
fake Misa in order to, get rid of her and blah, 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 blah. He'd already planned all that. But you haven't set up anything in this movie that makes me think that he is capable of that himself. And that's, again, part of the problem. That's why it fails as an adaptation is because it's, again, trying to take these established characters and changing who they are and pretty much just throwing light and L on these characters for name recognition.
It's like taking like Frodo from Lord of the Rings, and at the very end of the very last movie, he just dons a suit of armor, a sword and a shield, and he goes and says, hey, Sauron, put up or shut up. Let's go, bitch. And he like fist fights the Dark Lord. You're like, that's not the character you've been showing us.
Well, and that also takes that in that case would take away from the theme of the Lord of the Rings, like we talked about in the last one, the theme of how one small person, can affect all of that. Because we don't expect him to defeat Sauron, we expect to do him his own way. And one of the themes of Death Note, the show, is that justice is subjective.
Yeah.
Justice is a subjective concept, and both Elle and Light think that they are doing what is most just. You have that beautiful back and forth speech between them after Elle tricks, Light
into killing the fake, and basically revealing his area.
Revealing what area of Japan that he's in. And they both think that they are doing what's right, but how do you choose which side you're supposed to, which side is actually right? And that's one of the themes of the show that the movie it doesn't get over. It says, hey, this kid's using the Death Note for revenge. I guess revenge is the theme of this movie?
So going back to my original definition, that in order to make it a good adaptation, you have to understand what the original themes and messages of the original were. And by the way that you're talking, and I completely agree, the American Death Note does not understand why Elle picked up that Death Note and turned into, or not why Elle, why Light picked up that Death Note and turned into the mass murderer that he became. Why he said, I will be the god of this new world. They completely missed the mark on who he was and why he did what he did.
Right. And if that's true strikes. It throws away who the characters were. It throws away who, it throws away some of the themes. So it does not work as an adaptation. Whether or not it is a good film, again, good films are subjective, but it is not a good adaptation.
So to transition a little bit onto a more positive note, I would like to talk.
Positive note, okay.
I would like to talk about some adaptations that I think actually worked really well. And the biggest one on my list, and I know that you haven't watched this, but you need to, is the Ace Attorney Phoenix Wright live action movie. It's fucking hilarious in the best of ways. It is very true to the story of the original. It gets the intended messages of the original. To be fair, the original is a video game. But they get the characters right, they get the comedy right, they get the pacing right. And it very accurately translates the kind of over-the-top goofiness combined with the morbid seriousness of like, hey, these are all murder trials. And it gets it across in a very good way. I would love to sit down with you one day and watch it, because to me, the Phoenix Wright live action movie is exactly what we want. And I know, it's technically replicating a visual novel video game.
No, there's an Ace Attorney anime.
I know, but again, the game came first. So the at that point, the anime would also be an adaptation. But still, it gets across exactly what you want to. It's faithful to the story. It's faithful to the characters. It's faithful to the plot. And it adds to it. Because I'll be honest, when the entire court does that whole anime where like they suddenly fall down from shock of somebody being really stupid and like their feet go up in the air, seeing that recreated in live action with this entire courtroom of people just go and like fall on their face had me cackling like a madman. I mean, genuinely, like even the super serious villain attorney who's like, even he does and like falls down before like catching himself and pulling himself back up. I was crying. I was laughing so hard at
But
that.
if you're going to adapt something like that, maybe that's a way to do it. You could make it more realistic, like a lot of the DCEU is doing. But you could also just make it as goofy as the original. And I don't think Ace Attorney is a bad thing to adapt in live action.
Mhm.
It is something that would work very well
It's
in live
court
action.
drama.
Yeah.
It's a court drama, absolutely. Just so you said that you heard it at 12:01 at 11:59 on Christmas Eve. That's right. So,
Oh, wait.
huh?
That's right. Like
What?
Phoenix, right?
I just threw something at her for that. Okay, then never mind. I'm gonna stop my sentence there because
No, keep going.
No, you ruined it. Yeah.
Please.
Okay. I was just trying to recreate the joke from this. So you said that it was like 12:01 a.m. Christmas Eve. Right. It was like 2 minutes after the bell tolled on Christmas Eve. Yeah, that's right. So 2 minutes after the bell tolled midnight Christmas Eve would actually make it Christmas Day. And he says that like this big revelation, and the entire courtroom just collapses. And they're like, yes, that's what that means. Your point being. So again, we're kind of getting towards the end of time. Speed run, real quick.
Podcast speed run.
Podcast speed run. His podcast speed run. Go burr. I'm gonna throw out some properties that were adaptations, animated adaptations. And I want your opinion, Ravah, on whether or not you think that they were good, bad, and like a one sentence responses to why.
So what do you mean good or bad?
Was it a good adaptation or a bad adaptation?
Gotcha.
And a one sentence explanation of why. All right, so I'm going to start with something easy. X-Men the animated series.
Oh, that's right. We are talking about animation. Which one?
It's the
original 90s one.
Yes.
I have not watched it since I was a very small child, so I would say that it was a great adaptation because it took the comics and it said, "Hey, let's take all these still images and move them and give it fluid action," and that's good. That's great.
All right. Second one. What you call it? I guess I have to ask. Did you watch Spider-Man the animated series back in the 90s?
No.
Or Ultimate Spider-Man? I forget what it was called.
I watched when I was at that age, I was watching a lot of Disney cartoons. So if you ask me about like the Little Mermaid cartoon, the Aladdin cartoon, I could talk to you about those, but those aren't really adaptations.
Yeah, no, they're more like continuation sequel series. Oh man. Okay, so maybe we have to do this in reverse because I'm about to out Ravah so hard. She has not seen Superman the animated series. She has not seen Batman the animated series. Not seen Batman Beyond. She has not seen Justice League the animated or Justice League Unlimited. Just outing you so hard right now. I'm so sorry.
You hadn't seen Tangled, so I don't want to go there.
I hadn't seen Tangled until like 2 weeks ago. So I mean, I guess I'll take my lumps. I would. So then, I don't know. There goes my speed run. I would argue personally that all of those were excellent adaptations because they were true to the stories of the originals, true to the characters of the originals, and especially in the case of Batman the animated series. Batman the animated series is what made me fall in love with Batman. It wasn't the comics; it was Batman the animated series. But Kevin Conroy as Batman was just perfect.
And your hero, Mark Hamill.
And my hero, Mark Hamill, as the best iteration of the Joker. Sorry, Joaquin Phoenix, ever. Just absolutely blew me away. And when I found out that he was also the voice of Firelord Ozai, I was like, what is this world I am living in? So we're at 50 minutes now, I think.
So I will say, tune into part 3 as we get to all the tidbits we didn't talk about, including a good knockdown drag out between Arthur and myself as we argue over whether Warcraft was a good adaptation. So make sure to tune in the next couple of weeks. Remember that Harambe was our Nexus event and the court is adjourned.
Goodbye.